Welcome, brothers. I'm J.K. Mazy, head coach and founder of the Porn Reboot system. You can learn more about us by visiting elevatedrecovery.org. And if you are a man who's trying to end his out-of-control behavior with pornography, with masturbation, or if you have any other sort of sexually compulsive behavior, I release 4 videos a week and we cover a range of topics. Go ahead and subscribe and make sure you click on the little bell icon so that you receive notifications each time I release a video. In the YouTube app, go to notifications and turn on subscriptions. In the settings, go to notifications and scroll to the YouTube app and allow notifications. Let's hop on to the topic of today. Now, a few days ago, I spoke about how to get rid of unwanted sexual fantasies by masturbating. And this is a strategy which should be employed by not many men, okay? It doesn't apply to many people. It is also a risky strategy, but the important thing is that it is a strategy that works for men who are slipping, for men who are still masturbating and still at a stage where they have no idea how to control their behavior. But they do have some fantasies that they masturbate to that you're just like, you know what? I don't want this fantasy in my life. It doesn't make me feel good. And that's the definition of an unwanted fantasy. Any sort of fantasy which falls out of the realm for you of normal, healthy sexual behavior. It's also any sort of fantasy that when you masturbate or you view pornography to it, or you view pornography which contains the fantasy, when you orgasm, you feel shame or you experience some sort of negative emotion. That would be considered an unwanted fantasy. So this is going to be a very, very simple video on how to do this verbally. I do want to mention one more thing. This is for unwanted fantasies. Not random fantasies, not fantasies that you masturbate to all the time. Simply fantasies that you do not want to keep having and you feel that you have no control over them, all right? So to do this the right way, the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you are alone in a place where if you speak, no one is going to hear you. This isn't something that you can whisper. It isn't something that you can say in a low voice. You're going to have to be able to speak out loudly, right? So if you don't have the privacy at home, you're going to have to wait till you have that privacy. You're going to have to go out into an open field or out into the woods or somewhere where you can do this without anybody hearing it. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to take your phone or a clock or whatever and set a timer for 10 minutes. Then I want you to pick that unwanted fantasy and listen carefully. I want you to verbalize the entire fantasy in detail. That means you're going to open your mouth and you're going to step by step talk about what happens in that fantasy with you being one of the participants in that fantasy. Again, I'm making it clear, this is an unwanted fantasy. It might be something which feels deviant to you. It might be something which, in some cases, if you actually engage in the fantasy, might be illegal, right? So be very wary of this prior to trying this exercise. But you are verbalizing it and you cannot stop till your alarm has gone off after 10 minutes. You're going to feel very uncomfortable. A lot of different types of emotions are going to come up, but you can't stop. You absolutely can't. Once you're done and once the timer goes off, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to think, not verbalize. I want you to spend a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, thinking about an alternative fantasy where you are actually comfortable. So if you're in a relationship, think about a fantasy that involves your partner or a healthy, intimate sexual encounter with somebody that you are comfortable with. After hearing this, you might have some concerns. So you might be concerned, of course, that if you verbalize the fantasy, that it might make you even more aroused and put you at risk for a slip. But I want to make one thing clear. If this is truly an unwanted fantasy, when you verbalize it, you're going to experience a host of negative emotions, so many emotions that arousal is not going to be something that's possible. Also remember, you're verbalizing something which has only existed in the recesses of your mind. You've only ever watched it, It's only ever been in your head. Maybe for some of you, you write erotica, you write erotic stories, but you've never spoken it out. Your physiology is going to be completely different when you open your mouth and you say it. So you're not going to feel comfortable at the end of it. When you switch to a fantasy that you're more comfortable with, or a fantasy that involves intimate and healthy sexual behavior, you're going to experience a sense of relief. You're going to experience a sense of normalcy. Like, okay, this is actually something that is normal behavior, and it was super uncomfortable to actually open my mouth and talk about all those things. And that fantasy just doesn't seem as appealing to me as it once was. In fact, it's funny that I felt relieved to engage in a fantasy that was more healthy. I want you to do this about 3 or 4 times a week. The key to this is being absolutely rational and logical while you're doing this. This is not an exercise in arousal. This has nothing to do with engaging in the fantasy. For this particular exercise, you're simply verbalizing the fantasy. And don't worry, you're fully able to verbalize the fantasy because you've lived this unwanted fantasy many times, hundreds of times, via pornography or in your head. Now, if you feel that you're not going to be able to do this rationally, if you believe that you're going to abuse it and make it fantasy, if you already know that you're going to change up something about this strategy, like I always get guys who change things up. Even when I say follow it strictly as I laid it out, they'll be the guy who's like, well, I couldn't really say things verbally, so I recorded it into my phone and I put it in my ears and I listened back to it. Like, that's the same thing. No, each time you do this, you have to do it verbally. You have to open up your mouth and say it, and it must be done in a rational way where you're not engaged in it emotionally, a positive emotion, and you have to end it by thinking briefly about an alternative fantasy where you would be more comfortable. Now, if you have any questions about this, if you have any concerns, I will be happy to respond to them in the comment section below. And in a couple of days, I'll be giving you an alternative way to get rid of unwanted emotions, but this time we're not going to be speaking, there's not going to be any masturbation involved, and all of this is going to be done in your head. I'm JK, your brother in this struggle. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Whenever you're ready, there are a couple of ways that I can help you end your out of control behavior with pornography, masturbation, or any sort of out of control sexual behavior. The first way is to download a free copy of my ebook. It's called 7 Secrets of Porn-Free Men, and it's the roadmap to ending your out of control behavior. In there, I outline the different steps that men, my clients specifically, who have been free of pornography for over 5, 6, 7 years, have applied to their life to stay off pornography for that long. The second way is to join our private and confidential Facebook community. So we have a private group where you can learn more about my system, where you can speak to other men about my system, where you can get more clarity on applying these coping strategies. Sometimes I can't do it all in the YouTube comments, but I can respond via video if you are in our Facebook group. And the third way is if you're at a point where you know that you need help, you need a system, you need something reliable, something predictable, something consistent, and you need the guidance of not just myself, a person who's been off this for over 9 years, but the guidance of other men who've been off pornography for a year, for 2 years. If you're like, I need to be in that community because I really need to believe that I can do this, then you might be a good fit for one of our coaching programs. We have 2 programs. The first is the implementation program, and the second is the intensive program. You'll have to get on a call with one of my team members to find out if you're a good fit for either of those programs. Now, there's a link to all of this in the description below the YouTube video. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I'll speak to you later on in the week.